They said it couldn't be done. They laughed when Grandpa said he was going to move the old red barn with nothing but his 1965 Massey Ferguson 135 and a couple of chains. I was just a kid at the time, maybe 9 or 10, but I remember that day like it was burned into the back of my mind. The sun had barely cleared the trees when Grandpa pointed at the barn and said, "We're moving it today." Now let me explain something. This wasn't a little shed. This was a 24 by 36 foot barn built in the 1940s with a sagging roof, tired timbers, and a family of raccoons living in the rafters. It sat too low on the field where the ground turned to mud every spring and flooded out the feed. Grandpa had been talking about moving it for years, but no one believed he'd ever actually do it. So when he backed the Massey out of the shed that morning with a cooler of iced tea, a spool of logging chain, and a grin on his face, we all thought he'd gone senile. Uncle Bill said, "Dad, you're gonna rip the whole thing in half." Aunt May muttered, "He needs his head checked." But Grandpa just said, "Y'all sit and watch." He walked around the barn, knocking on the beams, measuring with nothing but a piece of string and pure instinct. Then he wedged 4 huge oak skids underneath, one at each corner, and ran the chains through reinforced eyelets he'd bolted to the barn's base 2 years prior. That's right, he'd been planning this for years. We just hadn't noticed. By noon, everything was hooked up. Grandpa climbed onto the Massey, slipped it into low gear, and let out the clutch. The chains creaked. The ground shook. The barn didn't move. I swear you could hear the neighbors chuckling from 3 farms over, but Grandpa didn't flinch. He throttled up slowly, real slow, and the Massey growled like an old bear waking from a nap. And then it moved. An inch. Then another. Dust kicked up. Boards moaned. The raccoons bailed out the windows, and before we knew it, that barn was sliding across the field. Slow as syrup. Steady as sunrise. People started showing up. Cars lined the gravel road. Some brought lawn chairs. It was like a parade of disbelief. Grandpa just kept going, one hand on the wheel, the other holding a mason jar of sweet tea. It took him 4 hours to drag that barn 200 yards uphill. He stopped twice, once to rechain a corner and once to feed his dog. When he finally set the brakes and unhooked the chains, the barn sat on high, dry ground. Not a wall cracked. Not a single board broken. No one said a word for a minute. Then Uncle Bill shook his head and said, "Well, I'll be danged." Grandpa looked around at the crowd and said, "Guess y'all ain't laughing now, huh?" We all burst out laughing. With him this time, he wasn't just stubborn. He was calculated. He had patience, experience, and a whole lot of quiet genius that city folks wouldn't understand. Now that barn still stands today, stronger than ever. And every time I see it, I remember the day Grandpa, at 73 years old, hitched a building to a 2-wheel drive tractor and dragged it like a sled. That day taught me something. Never underestimate an old man with a plan and a Massey Ferguson.